But if a Washington Post reporter is asking me almost like a catechism, whatever question I said, I'm against invidious racial discrimination, whatever form it takes, but says, do you denounce white supremacy? It's incumbent on us for us to define what white supremacy is. Do you believe punctuality is a vestige of white supremacy, Dasha?
Look,
because if you don't, then you have a disagreement about many of the people who are defining those terms, or the written word, or the use, or the nuclear family. These aren't my words. These are the words of intellectual proponents from Ibram Kendi to the Ayanna Presleys to BLM that have said these are vestiges of white supremacy.
But you are also cherry picking when you bring up Justice Smollett.
I'll look at all of the statistics. More black on black crime. If you really care about actual crime against black Americans, let's get to the root causes of it in the inner cities of this country.
The Anti-Defamation League tracked a 38% increase in white supremacist propaganda last year.
Who's tracking that?
The Anti-Defamation League.
Yeah, the ADL, I don't think is a particularly credible source when they have cherry-picked information.
When we're talking about
all right, folks. Well, Vivek Ramaswamy recently did an interview with NBC News, and we got yet another rendition of liberal media trying to grill Vivek on the same exact tired old question of, do you condemn white supremacy? Now, for the record, Vivek has answered that question, in my opinion, quite well already. He said, I'm against all forms of racial discrimination and hatred, obviously, but at the same time, you are asking me a dumb question. White supremacy is far from the biggest or even top 100 problems currently facing the country right now, and the only reason you're asking me that, and the only reason they always ask conservatives that, is to try to set them up, to try to make them look stupid, to try to essentially waste their time and stop anyone from talking about the real issues that are actually going on in our country. We're going to react to the NBC interview and Vivek's masterclass of tearing her apart on this question in a second, and you'll see she basically loses her mind. But first, to kind of give you the context here, this whole spat began when this week a Washington Post reporter at a town hall tried to ask that exact question. Do you condemn white supremacy? And we're going to play it here. Here was his response to that question for the context.
You can say that you condemn white supremacy.
I'm not going to recite some catechism for you. I'm against vicious racial discrimination in this country. So I'm not pledging allegiance to your new religion of modern wokeism, which absolutely fits the test. I'm not going to bend the knee to your religion. I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to bend the knee to mine, and I'm not going to bend the knee to yours. But do I condemn vicious racial discrimination? Yes, I do. Am I going to play your silly game of gotcha? No, I'm not. And frankly, this is why people have lost trust. And I know you're going to go print the headline tomorrow. I already know this. We already know how your game works. Vivek Ramaswamy refuses to condemn white supremacy because you asked a stupid question. The reality
is a stupid question.
I condemn vicious racial discrimination in this country, but the kind of vicious and systematic racial discrimination we see today is discrimination on the basis of race in a very different direction. You want to know what the best way is to end discrimination on the basis of race? Stop discriminating on the basis of race. Do that, and we're going to move this country forward. And I don't care whether you're black or white or brown or anything in between. That's how we're going to unite this country. You people have been responsible for dividing this country to a breaking point, creating a projection of national division. I meet people from the south side of Chicago to meetings like this one of every shade of melanin, multiple, from man to woman, doesn't make a difference, who are hungry for reviving unity in this country. And you, with your catechism that you try to get to politicians to whatever fake headline you're going to print on the basis of this conversation tomorrow, that's what's dividing this country to a breaking point. Shame on you. Look people in the eye and tell them what you've actually failed to tell them for the last 5 years. Own the accountability for your own failures as the media. That's how we rebuild trust in this country. And until then, I don't have a lot of patience to play the games.
So what's funny is that Vivek's exact prediction came true, because if you go to the Twitter account of that Washington Post reporter, that's exactly what she said. Vivek refused to condemn white supremacy because she called me out for asking a very stupid question. So you can go back and watch the video we did fully breaking down this exchange. And like I said at the time, in short, it was a very good way to handle it. It should be called out for a stupid question because that's exactly what it is. The point of it is to try to put him on defense. He didn't take the bait. I don't think any conservative should take the bait at this point. We have long established that the very people asking this question are not asking it in good faith. They are trying to make you look stupid. And again, that's a basically masterful way to handle that situation. But more recently, he did this interview with NBC News, and this very, as you can see, happy person in life, I'll say, tries to press him even more just straight up starts cutting him off and basically screaming at him about it. And check out what happens next. Here you go.
Because when you were talking to reporters last night, you called white supremacy a myth. When someone asked you about Dylan Roof, you said you didn't know who that is. Have you looked up what happened in 2015?
Yeah, look, I said this last night. Invidious racial discrimination is wrong no matter how it happens. But if a Washington Post reporter is asking me almost like a catechism, whatever question I said, I'm against invidious racial discrimination, whatever form it takes, but says, do you denounce white supremacy? It's incumbent on us for us to define what white supremacy is. I wrote my book, Woke Inc., and I've written about the detailed understanding of what the popular understanding of these terms have come to mean. Do you believe punctuality is a vestige of white supremacy, Dasha?
Look,
because if you don't, then you have a disagreement about many of the people who are defining those terms, or the written word, or the use, or the nuclear family. These aren't my words. These are the words of intellectual proponents from Ibram Kendi to the Ayanna Presleys to BLM.
That's very true, by the way. I believe it's the African American History Museum, if I'm not mistaken, but it's one of those places. Literally says that showing up on time and expecting punctuality is a white construct, right? It's a symptom of whiteness and white supremacy. Nuclear family, I'm sure everyone knows what BLM had on its website. So that's also a very important point that he makes, which is when you say white supremacy, what do you actually mean? Because, of course, by the classical definition, everyone condemns it. But if we're moving to the world now where voting for Donald Trump makes you a white supremacist, which many people in this country actually believes, or showing up on time, or having a nuclear family, or literally not committing crime and living a functional life, if that is white supremacy, and if that's what you define as white supremacy, then that's a very different conversation. So that's a great point.
I said these are vestiges of white supremacy. So
Mr. Ramaswamy,
we can't have it both ways.
What you do, though.
We have to have an honest discussion.
Straw man arguments.
Last night, you brought up
Jussie Smollett as the best example of white supremacy.
Was the hottest thing in news in the back of a fake actual attack on him that we have to contend with.
And yet you have examples like the Buffalo shooter in New York just in 2022.
You have other examples.
But you are also cherry picking when you bring up Jussie Smollett.
I'll look at all of the statistics. More black on black crime. If you really care about actual crime against black Americans, let's get to the root causes of it in the inner cities of this country.
The Anti-Defamation League tracked a 38% increase in white supremacist propaganda last year.
Who's tracking that?
The Anti-Defamation League.
Yeah, the Anti-Defamation League, right? A very known, reliable source. I believe that's the same organization that said that the 3-point finger is a white supremacist hate symbol. And if you go on their website, basically almost every single number from 1 to 100 is in some way a white supremacist number. Okay, so yeah, that very serious organization, they're saying that white supremacist propaganda had a rise in the past year. Yeah, what do you think they define as white supremacist propaganda? Yeah, that's a real reliable source, right, folks? The ADL. The ADL, okay.
ADL, I don't think is a particularly credible source when they have a cherry-picked information.
When we're talking about
I would suggest look at there's a table, 2x2 table, a federal law enforcement data, which you could say what you do. Maybe we shouldn't believe that either. But look at black on Asian crime, black on black crime,
the FBI hate crime statistics. That's a law enforcement agency. 59.1% was based on race, ethnicity, and ancestry, saying hate crimes rose 12% between 2020 and 2021.
Look at the absolute.
Okay. Hate crimes rose 12% between 2020 and 2021. All right, newsflash for you, Dasha. Most crimes rose between 2020 and 2021, because if you remember, everything in America simply got significantly more dangerous. Number two, I don't know the specifics of these hate crimes, but first of all, white supremacist hate crimes are not the only type of hate crimes out there. Now, a counterpoint to be made, and the reason Vivek is right to look at raw violence, and I actually made the same exact point in my Vice panel like a year ago or so now, is many of the crimes that you see that seem to be racially motivated are not always prosecuted as hate crimes, because proving a hate crime is a taller order to make, and it's kind of a individual decision. And so an example I bring up is, the videos of, let's say, non-whites, right, for instance, that you saw in New York City of them, pushing Asians and stuff into subways. In the majority of cases, those types of crimes are not actually prosecuted as hate crimes. Okay, so it is a very misleading statistic. However, when you look at pure, for instance, white on black crime, if I'm not mistaken, that is one of the lowest types of violent crime that there is in the entire country. So, you know, the whole that statistic really doesn't actually mean anything. You say hate crimes went up. Yeah, the country got very dangerous. Yeah, newsflash. Yeah, all the crimes went up. Which hate crimes are they? Which are reported? Which are prosecuted as hate crimes? That statistic doesn't really mean a whole lot.
Absolute crimes themselves. What they classify as a hate crime is itself a political judgment. Yeah. I think that when you actually care about protecting life, if you want to say Black Lives Matter, let's look at where Black lives are actually being lost. It's in the cities at the heart of other Black Americans and criminals that are restrained by the absence
that we talk about as well. But are we supposed to ignore white supremacists?
It's not an issue that you talk about.
We're not supposed to ignore.
Hold on. It's not an issue that you talk about. Because these people pretend as if everything in the country is fine. You know, no, urban cities are not dealing with huge influxes of violent crime that, newsflash, in most cases is not being committed by white people. They don't talk about that. So that's a bunch of nonsense. You're not talking about it right now. The only thing NBC and Washington Post and all these groups care about asking Vivek about is white supremacy. So that's a bunch of crap. No, you don't talk about that.
Or any kind of crime, Dasha. That's what I say. But what I see is a selective reporting. Take the Nashville Transgender Shooter Manifesto. Every shooter manifesto in a mass shooting has been released within 48 hours, except for that one shooter in Nashville. Now, it ended up being leaked. What do you see? It wasn't a white supremacist. It was somebody that was actually making fun of using derogatory terms. I believe.
Okay, so why are you okay talking about that manifesto and not talking about the manifesto from the 2015?
I'm more than okay talking about both. But what I'm asking is, why is the mainstream media suppress that one? Why did the police suppress that one? Why was that the one shooter manifesto that of all of the mass shootings, every other shooter manifesto has been released? I'm focused on that one because that's the one that's been hidden from us. And it comes back to the point of my candidacy and the way I'm going to run this country. Trust the people with the truth. If it doesn't match your narrative,
the reality is right now,
I think the media did not hold the police accountable. They would have been demanding that.
Starting to gain traction with the Black community, with Latino voters. Do not worry that your rhetoric is pushing them away. There are folks
to the contrary. I think we're going to bring Black people into this movement
who are concerned about your rhetoric.
Well,
absolutely not, because if you're, say, a Black person or a Hispanic person in the inner city, is the number one threat to your life KKK guys running around and burning crosses in your yard? Or is it the very real issue of urban crime that's happening in your own community all around you? In fact, I would argue a big reason Republicans are gaining with these minority groups is because for years they've done all this gaslighting about white supremacy. But especially as the country gets more violent and unaffordable and unsafe and all this stuff, a lot of these people are looking around and saying, well, I don't see the white supremacist, but I do see the violent criminals that a lot of, Republicans tend to talk about more than the Democrats. So, no, absolutely not.
Well, you know what? I'm concerned about their corruption. If you had somebody who actually one of the most prominent Black influencer the other day, what did she say? I've been Black my whole life, and this man could actually unify this country, in response to a long exchange I had with a Black pastor who at an event here in Iowa did challenge me with a hard question, asking me, are my views against affirmative action, how do those align with historical racial injustice?
Affirmative action is a debate that is being had.
If I may just finish this. If I may finish my point,
Dasha.
With racism, I think I will be better positioned.
You're denying that racism is a problem.
I've never denied that racism is a problem. And if you listen to the response I gave to that Black pastor, my whole point is racism has been a major problem for most of our national history. But we're getting close to the promised land that Martin Luther King envisioned. We're as darn close to it as we ever have been. And so what bothers the heck out of me is it's right when we're close to that promised land. Martin Luther King said it, I may not get there with you, and he didn't get there with us. But I think it desecrates the legacy of our civil rights movement, desecrates the legacy of Martin Luther King, that right when we get closest to the point of having racial equality and gender equality and even opportunities for people of minorities of many types, are we perfect? No. But are we as close as we've ever been? Yes, we have. To then obsess over systemic racism, to then obsess over white guilt and otherwise, we're creating new waves of racism, Dasha, that we otherwise would have avoided right when we're closest to having achieved what even the proponents of the civil rights movement would have dreamed of. That's what bothers me. My exchange with that Black pastor about a week or so ago, right here in Iowa, not far from where we are, it was in Indianola, not far from where we are in Des Moines, was that we're founded on the pursuit of a more perfect union. the pursuit of liberty, equality, and justice for all. And I reject this left-wing narrative that's creating more artificial division. So I believe I will bring more black and Hispanic voters into our movement, not by saying fake poll-tested slogans, but by speaking the hard truth that we've been imperfect in our past, but let us celebrate the progress we've made and reject the media's cherry-picking narratives to actually get to the truth of the matter. And now if we care about black lives, the things we're going to do isn't obsessing about white supremacy. It's actually fixing the problems in our cities, which I will do as our president.
He said it. I mean, I really have not much else to add beyond that. It's just the truth. White supremacy is far from close to the biggest problem in our country. The statistics she tries to bring up don't actually prove the point she's thinking that they prove. And really, there's no single stat you could bring up that in any way corroborates this idea that white supremacy is the biggest problem facing our country. In fact, it's one of the smallest problems facing our country, if at all. And I mean, again, I basically have nothing else to add beyond that. Vivek obviously proves his point quite well. I think the point he was trying to make on the Nashville shooter manifesto is exactly highlighting what the media does with white supremacy, which is you have this tiny ant. You know, we'll say it's a tiny ant that's white supremacy. They go up to it with a magnifying glass, right? And so this is exactly why anytime a white supremacist like Dylan Roof commits any type of mass shooting or terrorist attack, it's the biggest story for the next 10 years. But in the case of the Nashville shooter, in which a transgender left-wing terrorist committed a mass shooting against a bunch of children, that's swept under the rug. That's barely even talked about. And just this week, I believe in the state of Iowa, actually, we had another incident of a transgender mass shooter. And how much have you heard about it? How much has the media talked about it? Very seldom to none. Why? Because this is exactly what Vivek is pointing out, which is they create this artificial ghost of white supremacy and they make it seem like the biggest issue in the country. They spend 5 minutes of this interview wasting his time about it. Why? To distract from the real issues that are really going on and, you know, waste the time of conservatives who are trying to actually address them. All right, with that said, before we close out this video, there is one other clip from this interview I want to react to where the NBC reporter tries to claim he is pushing conspiracy theories while herself lying about the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping setup. I've not seen this clip yet. I assume it's related to the whole January 6th thing where, you know, he calls out, hey, what's really going on here? What really happened here? So let's play this and then we'll close out the video.
A lot of ideas out there. You've suggested on the campaign trail that January 6th was an inside job, that the plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer was a job of inside entrapment, that the House Republicans, let me finish, that the House Republicans impeachment inquiry is part of a Democratic plot to sideline Biden, that there is a devious Democratic scheme to actually nominate Nikki Haley. The reality is none of these are top issues for Iowa voters. So why?
But white supremacy is? But white supremacy is, Dasha? Give me a break.
Why are you focused on these conspiracy theories? Well,
focused is a heavy-handed word, Dasha. If you take 80% of what I said, I'm talking about policy and future direction of the country, talking about how we'll increase the supply of energy to bring down the cost for everyday Americans. And so that's 80% of what I'm talking about. But I'm not going to hide from what I do believe are realities hiding in plain sight that people deserve to know about, which the last item that you described. It's not a secret that Larry Fink is going to fundraisers of Nikki Haley, propping her up. That actually one of the biggest funders of the lawsuits against Trump, including efforts to keep him off the ballot, is Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. That's a $250,000 donor to super PAC supporting Nikki Haley. And so I reject this mainstream media general narrative of dismissing something as a conspiracy theory, when in fact I'm a big fan of going after facts hiding in plain sight.
But you know that when you say these things, you know when you bring up the Gretchen Whitmer thing, you know when you bring up January 6th,
grounded in fact.
January 6th being an inside job. Yes, 80% of what you talk about might be policy, but when you hit those issues, that's going to take over the news cycle. You know how.
Oh no, how dare he call Nikki Haley a corrupt politician and point out that people who historically support Democrats are supporting her candidacy. Oh no, that's a conspiracy theory. Yeah, because he's certainly the first political candidate to ever call out his opponents for corruption or So stupid. And by the way, she says, the media is going to make a big deal out of that, right? That's actually a self-own, because it shows that the media does not actually pay attention or care about the things that are serious, but they hyperfixate on stupid things. Great job, journalist, NBC, proving why you suck, okay? Proving why you do a poor job, but anyways.
I think it should. I'm speaking the truth,
but
as it does evenly across the board.
You know how it works. Are you using that to get attention as you've been slumping in the polls?
To the contrary, I'm actually speaking. You have a lot of political analysts that look at this and say exactly what you're saying. Why aren't you just saying what causes you to poll better? It's what every other political candidate's doing. They're taking what their consultants serve them up. Here's what the voters say are the top issues. Spout back to them what the voters want to hear.
So why?
I'm sharing my true convictions. And I think if we want to revive our constitutional republic, we deserve a government that tells the people the truth again. Not just when it's easy, but when it is hard. Our government has systematically lied to us on things that really matter. Of the origin of COVID-19. We were told for years that it didn't come from a lab in China, when it absolutely did. In fact, you were suppressed on social media for saying it. The eve of the last election, I think it's shameful that the Hunter Biden laptop story was systematically suppressed, so voters didn't have that information.
But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about Gretchen Whitmer being an inside job of entrapment.
I'm talking about a government that has lied to its people. The same FBI that's investigating conservatives, the same FBI and the same law enforcement apparatus, Jack Smith, that has subpoenaed millions of Americans for anybody who liked or retweeted a Donald Trump post in 2020. That's Orwellian, but that's the same federal law enforcement apparatus that put people up to an alleged kidnapping plot that they otherwise wouldn't have been put up to. Multiple defendants acquitted on grounds of entrapment. And so is this a top issue?
That's all true, by the way. That is, in fact, what happened with the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping thing.
That voters bring up on the mind of voters? Absolutely, it's not. But if the mainstream media is pushing, and the establishment in both parties is pushing one established narrative.
So if it's not a priority for voters, why are you so focused on it?
Because truth is a priority for me. That's the answer. Truth is the priority for this campaign. And I don't need to be speaking to what every other professional politician is spouting off. We need to speak the hard truths that other candidates are unwilling to touch. And even though that doesn't poll necessarily on what NBC or the Des Moines Register or another media outlet is going to ask voters what are the top issues on their mind, it's important. What really is important to many voters, I believe, is a government that trusts them with the hard truth again. That hasn't happened for a very long time. And so my view is if that's what the voters want, that's what they're going to get from me. If they want somebody who's going to incrementally reform things, change tax rates by 1% in one direction or another, and call that a legislative accomplishment, go with somebody else. That's not me. But if you want a candidate who is...
By the way, I think it's what differentiates him from Nikki Haley and the others. I mean, that's probably a stupid thing to say because the policy is very different. But it's also the fact that he is willing to go there. Right. So it's not the most important issue to any of these voters. Right. It's not. What do you think about, for instance, the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping case or 9/11 or something like that? But what it does show as a secondary point is, hey, if he's willing to go there, if he's willing to not be afraid to tell the truth, then maybe I can trust him a little more. So, I disagree with her assessment. This is not to say Vivek is going to dominate the Iowa caucus by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that's why a lot of people respect him. Okay, because he does have good ideas on all these different political issues, but it's also that when push comes to shove, he's willing to address things that are difficult. That gains respect from people.
Who is actually going to revive the ideals of 1776, who is going to trust the people transparently with what the government knows to be true. If you want a government that actually is of and for and by the people again, I think I'm the sole candidate in this race who can deliver that. And that choice is up to the voters.
And by the way, that stuff is important to me. I mean, obviously, when I go to the ballot box, I'm thinking of the most important issues facing the country, economy, immigration, foreign policy, stuff like that. But it does matter in the back of my head. All the stuff our government has systematically lied about over the past couple decades, JFK assassination, the rabbit hole begins there. It doesn't end there. I would like to know the truth. Okay. And I really could never trust the U.S. government until it comes clean about that stuff and shows that it's willing to be transparent. Why would you trust a government like that? So that stuff all does matter. But anyways, with that said, folks, let me know what you thought about this interview in the comment section down below. The whole time she's angry, she's seething at him, blood is coming out of her eyes. But Vivek doesn't take the bait. Vivek doesn't let it get to him. And that's why he's so masterful. And that's why whatever he does, going forward, he needs to continue to do these interviews. He's very good at it. And not only is he trying to be an ambassador for his campaign, in my opinion, but he really is a good spokesperson for the way a lot of conservatives feel in our country. So with that said, folks, let me know your thoughts once again. And until next time, be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Alpha moves only. God bless. Have a very good day. Peace.